Hi, everybody. Welcome to this special report. I am Andrew Muller, your host, Chief of Operations at LibertySentinel.org, also a contributor to the New American Magazine. We're so excited that you've joined us today. If you've been paying attention to the news at all, you know that there is a whole bunch of craziness going on in Europe, as in America as well. But we're seeing particularly the deep state really exposing its head with what's going on in Romania, what's going on with the Ukraine and Russian war, and at the heart of it all is the European Parliament, the European Union, the European Commission, and really these international bodies that exist that frankly strip sovereignty away from countries and make situations worse, if I'm going to be honest. We're bringing in an expert today to discuss all of this. Her name is Scarlett Karoleva. I met her at Mega. If you are a loyal viewer of our programming, you know that I was at the Make Europe Great Again Summit in Brussels. We brought you some reporting and coverage from there. And I actually had lunch with Scarlett, and we had a very pleasant conversation. She's a former press officer, worked in the European Union. Now she's a political commentator, and she joins us now. Scarlett, how are you doing?
Very well. I'm very excited to be here because we have a lot to discuss. Like you said, Europe is going crazy.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and we're excited to have you on and to break some of this down. I want to talk a little bit about a story that you told me about while we were at Mega that it seems like the media is not really touching at all, and that is the influence of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, on the European Commission. You say that they are having a corrupt merger, a corrupt relationship to push the European Commission. Tell us about it.
So, I think Donald Trump is starting this revolution of common sense and it is catching fire, thanks to Doge and all of the things that came out about US aid and how money has been being used by the government to really establish their own agenda. We're seeing actually the same thing happening in Europe now. And thankfully, thanks to Trump and Doge, is being getting offered a platform. Before I get into it, I really want to make sure that people understand what we're talking about. It's really important to understand that there are three different bodies, but I'm going to cover two of them. There's the European Parliament and there's the European Commission. So the European Parliament has our representatives that we get to elect. So every member state has their representatives in the European Parliament. They, however, are not the ones who have the power to also propose legislation. That power lies with the European Commission. And the European Commission is basically the deep state. They are the unelected bureaucrats who are holding power in Brussels, and they are the ones proposing laws. They are also the ones that, for example, now propose to put 800 billion into our military and defense. And the problem is that the European Commission is having much more power than the European Parliament. And they're doing it in a way that I would describe as Machiavelli. Because what did Machiavelli say? Don't get your hands dirty, get someone else to do the dirty job for you. And that's exactly what the European Commission has been doing. They are now funding NGOs, non-governmental organizations, which, let's be honest, if you're there to promote a certain agenda for a government, it's not that non-governmental. And they've been doing it in several member states. So this is one thing. They're paying NGOs to promote their biggest dream, which is further integration of the European Union. That means that more power goes to Brussels and less power stays with the member states. Like I said, 800 billion going to defense. Defense is actually a competence of the member states, not of Brussels. So here you see every time they're trying to get more and more power. And they've been doing it in multiple ways. So one of them is NGOs, like I said before, but also using mainstream media. So they have Euronews, which has been receiving 25 million a year to promote their agenda. And to do the most shocking revelation is that they're really doing it to push their globalist and elite agenda. I am from the Netherlands. And as you know, in Europe, we're doomed with this idiotic Green Deal. And what did they do to actually make sure people are super enthusiastic to get the Green Deal done? It's not that they are opposing it to us. No, they use grassroots movements, civil societies and NGOs to push it upon us. So you have Greenpeace, an NGO who's been paid by the European Commission. They started a lawsuit against the Dutch state. They said that the Dutch state should actually reduce the nitrogen, oxygen emissions, and they won. And this is how the deep state is operating. They are making sure their agenda is being pushed to governments by NGOs.
Wow. So, what do you think is the action item here, Scarlett, for people who are in Europe? We have some European listeners. Most of them are Americans. But for any of our European listeners out there, or maybe watching this, what are some good action items for them to push back against this bureaucratic, Machiavellian style system that's oppressing them?
First and foremost, you need to have transparency. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. People need to acknowledge that this has been happening and it needs to be getting more attention, but it's very clear that we need to have a form of an EU Doge. This is the only way you can actually control it. And the way you would do it is that this power that is now with the European Commission should go to the European Parliament. It should go to the people that we elected to represent us. And they should be able to control where that money is being funneled to, because that is another problem with how the European Commission is operating. And this is, now with the NGOs is one example, but every time there's a crisis, there's a new fund that they have. And there's always lacking transparency, which is kind of ironic because they pride themselves in being so democratic, but not having any transparency on where that money is going to, I wouldn't necessarily call that democratic. So it's first and foremost, we need to restore that power, bring it back to where it's supposed to be. And second of all, we need to make sure there's transparency and control on how that money is being spent.
Yep, absolutely. And as you know, because we saw the same thing, if you go to Brussels and you go to the European Parliament, you're going to see all these big banners and signs that says democracy in action, and it's labeled everywhere. And of course, anybody who opposes those institutions are threats to democracy. We saw that here in America with Donald Trump, right? He starts to do things that the people want. He starts to talk about fair elections, free elections, transparency in government, and yet he's the threat to democracy, when really the kingmakers, the string pullers who operate at the highest levels of our government, they are the ones who are the threats to democracy, yet they blame us for the things they themselves are guilty of. I think this is a good pivot, Scarlett, to talk a little bit about some of the defense spending. You mentioned that with the European situation, of course, that's going on with Ukraine and Russia. We had a big explosion recently in the Oval Office. It was really hard to watch a murder take place in our White House, but yet we did, with Donald Trump absolutely destroying Vladimir Zelensky when he came allegedly to sign a peace deal and some things regarding rare earth minerals for the United States to get some of our money back. Donald Trump has said repeatedly that Europe is giving their money, but they have securities. The U.S. has given tons of money, more money than Europe, and has basically just lost that money. So now there's a whole struggle going on to get something for the money. That's where the rare earth mineral deal came in. But now you have people in the EU saying, well, we're going to increase defense spending by $800 billion. That's a very large sum. Scarlett, what is your take on that? And what really, I guess, is the temperature of Europeans over there? Is there a lot of support for Ukraine? Do people want to spend this $800 billion? Is that something that's popular, or is this just the elites banging the war drums?
Wow, where do I even begin? I mean, let us first discuss the timing of this deal, right? Because the thing is that now Trump is in office, he is really trying to opt for peace negotiations, as anyone with common sense would. But instead of that, the EU is thinking, why not spend 800 billion into defense? And I do acknowledge that we have been very bad at paying the 2% GDP norm, which is required to pay to NATO. We have not done that. We have failed in doing so. So there is no debate that we should definitely increase our defense budget. The only problem that I have with it is the timing. Why do it now, after 3 years, when we should actually be opting for peace negotiation, as Trump has actively been doing? You're not ending the war, you are prolonging it. Then the question, how is the temperature in Europe? Well, it's very divided, because the issue is that the propaganda machine has been working over hours, and it did a great job indoctrinating people that we need to help Ukraine no matter what it takes. And there are several issues, like where is going headed. It's not just EU defense budget. I think what the European Commission, once again, the deep state, the bureaucrats we didn't elect, what they really want is actually an EU army. I think this is the real agenda behind it. And let's not forget that defense, as I said, is not a competence of Brussels, it's a competence of the member states. It's yet again a crisis that they use to seize more power. They say, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I'm personally from the Netherlands. Our Prime Minister, Dick Schoof, and you as an American will probably say, how is this even possible? Nobody elected him. He's an unchosen prime minister because they refused to acknowledge the leader of the biggest party who actually won the elections. He went to Brussels and he agreed on a plan of 800 billion. Now, this week, our parliament voted against sending more money into Eurobonds, which means that we're going to have common debts in the European Union. The problem is because our prime minister already agreed to it, we will still have to pay. That's democracy in Europe. There is no democracy. It's a mock democracy, and it's a shame.
Yep, absolutely. There's a graph we'll put on the screen that shows a little bit of the NATO defense spending from 2023, the 1.3 trillion that went into NATO, the United States contributing 860 billion, while countries like Germany, 68.1 billion, UK, 65.8 billion, Poland 29.1 billion, Spain 19.2 billion, France 56.6 billion, and a whole bunch of other countries there. Very small contributions. And as an American, I look at the Ukraine war and I look what's going on with NATO, and I say, first of all, where in our Constitution does it permit our federal government to spend that kind of money in an international organization? It's not there. And two, what do we get for that 860 billion? So far, it's just given us heartache, issues, war, big expenditures, and it hasn't led to more peace. It's led to more conflict. So my advice to the Trump administration, if you're watching President Trump and friends up in DC, is let's just take Doge one step further and say, let's not talk about efficiency as much as we talk about constitutionality as well. Because, of course, we want efficiency in areas where government should belong, but we also don't want efficiencies where government shouldn't belong. We want it to just be non-existent. And I think when it comes to funding endless wars, that's certainly a thing that should not be an efficient endeavor, but should just be a non-existent endeavor. And speaking about NATO, Scarlett, I think a big part of what's happened in Romania is due to the issue of NATO. They're, of course, constructing one of the largest, if not, from my understanding, the largest NATO base to date in the Romanian country. I believe it's going to be in the southeastern portion of the nation. And this is really going to be a gateway, as Kalin Georgescu said, for war. If anyone watched our interview that we did with George Simeon, the leader of the AUR, leader in the ECR, a big deal. He is a parliamentarian in Romania. He said that the deep state's going after Georgescu because he's against war. He has Trump-like policies. He's against NATO. He's against the war in Ukraine. And he wants to stop this NATO base being built in Romania to house tens of thousands of NATO soldiers who aren't Romanians. Scarlett, give us an update on what's going on in Romania. Last time we talked about it on the program, Georgescu was detained. He was not able to register at that point because he was being held by the authorities. What's the update on Romania, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a black day for democracy in the sense that Georgescu is no longer able to run for presidency anymore. They have declared him illegitimate because of foreign intervenence, and I will elaborate on that further. Now George Simeon is stepping up. He has announced that he will run for presidency. Hopefully they will not do the same to him as they did to Georgescu. It's interesting if you look at it because last week, George Simeon, who's now the leader of AUR, like you mentioned, he proposed a referendum whether Romania should stay both in the European Union and in NATO. And then a week later, Georgescu was actually abolished for running again. What a timing. How conveniently, isn't it, right? To silence your opposition like that. And that is exactly what a deep state is doing time after time again. And I want to go back to the story that I told you in the beginning about the deep state, the European Commission, funneling money into NGOs because they are now saying to Romania, oh, there is foreign intervenence. But that's exactly what they're doing with countries that don't follow their globalistic agenda. They've done it with Moldova. There was a referendum whether Moldova should stay in the EU or not. They went there and they gave them 1.8 billion. I would call that foreign intervenence if you do that right before a referendum, because you're clearly trying to influence the outcome of this referendum. And secondly, they've done it as well in Hungary. In Hungary, there was this NGO. It is called, building the tension, it's called Octors Foundation. They have received in 2022 3.3 million by the European Commission. They're also backed by Soros. And the thing is that they are constantly attacking the Orban government. Now, Viktor Orban is saying, look, I am going to ban foreign NGOs or NGOs that are being made by foreign agencies, which is completely understandable in this situation. And what does the European Commission do? They say, oh, well, you know what, then we're going to freeze your funding to retaliate. The European Commission is actively overthrowing people that are democratically chosen when it doesn't fit their globalistic agenda. They've done it in Romania, they've done it in Hungary, they've done it in Poland, and they will continue doing it so. So what George Simeon said is a deep state going after him is exactly that. And if we don't stand up, if we don't start talking about it, we're next. Don't think that because it hasn't happened in your country yet, it will not happen. And I'm talking to my European viewers right now. I think it's very important to have this sense of like, we need to act now, because if we don't do it, we're done. We're finished. Brussels wins, and we cannot let that happen.
Absolutely. And, as we witnessed in America over the last 4 years, the weaponization of justice against our current president, 47 Donald Trump. And I think that it's very useful to recognize this isn't just a one-off issue where a guy stands up in America and starts to defend the common man, and then the Department of Justice and our courts are weaponized against him. This is happening all over the place. It's happening in Romania. It's happening in all of Europe, because there is a true global conspiracy to destroy freedom. And that global conspiracy has roots with the World Economic Forum, it has roots with the United Nations, it has roots with the European Union, it has roots with the Bilderberg Group, and all these globalistic entities run by the elites. They don't want you to have freedom. They don't want democracy. They don't want, in our country, in America, a constitutional republic, because that rips the power out of their hands. It wrests the levers of political influence away from the elites, away from the oligarchs, and into the hands of the everyday common man, the common taxpayer. And our founding fathers, in their wisdom in America, set up a system of government to protect against that. But for it to work, it requires engaged citizens, engaged, educated, informed people. And that's why we do programs like this, to hopefully educate you, to get you interested in what's going on, not just in America, but also in the world, because our freedoms are on attack by global enemies. That's just the truth of it. So, Scarlett, I really appreciate you joining us. I want to give you an opportunity to offer some final thoughts. What's your advice to Americans? Of course, a lot of people say if America sneezes, the whole world catches a cold. What's your advice to our American viewers who, in my opinion, are very happy Trump won, but now we're kind of sitting back and watching the show unfold, but I think we need to be more engaged now than ever. What are your final thoughts and your advice to Americans?
My dear Americans, I am begging you from the bottom of my heart, don't give up on us. Maybe when you read the headlines, you think we've lost our mind. And let me tell you this, the elite has, but they've lost their mind a long time ago. Their days of reign are over. Europe is waking up. We are having a massive movement of make Europe great again. In each country, every right-wing party has been winning massively in the past elections. Their days of the elite has been counted and numered, and they know it. I can smell fear. It is over. So please pray for us. Stick with us. Don't give up, because we will prevail.
Excellent. Scarlett, how can people follow your work? Do you have a website, social media you want to direct people to? How can they stay in touch?
Absolutely. You can follow me on X by Scarlett Karoleva, and that's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Scarlett. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us for this report. And thank
Thanks for
you,
having me.
viewer, for tuning in. Absolutely, of course. And stay tuned to libertysentinel.org. Stay tuned to our newsletter. You can sign up there. It's free. It goes out twice a week. You can get headlines like this delivered to your inbox. We appreciate that. Also follow us on all the social medias at Liberty Sentinel. And we will keep you posted on what's going on in America, but also what's going on in the world. Because as we said, our freedoms are under attack, but they're under attack by global enemies, and we need to know the full story. So thank you for watching. Stay tuned. And until next time, God bless you all.